Good morning. We look today at Numbers 9 through 11. Um, and we are one day ahead by following the daily readings in the Daily Bread magazine or devotional compared to following the Bible Gateway. So we'll get back on track. Anyway, in chapter 9, God speaks again to Moses, and I mean, it just seems so strange to be reading this, and God is speaking to Moses, and we're going to find out here today that Moses goes and asks God a question and gets a response. But in the beginning of chapter 9, God speaks to Moses and says, "Let the people celebrate the Passover or observe the Passover now in this second year on the 14th day of the month." At twilight, and so that was what, they did a year before when they had been freed from captivity in Egypt. They had, on the 14th day of the month, they had celebrated, observed the Passover, or they had, instituted, had done the very first one. And so here now it's a year later that Moses and the Israelites are all still camped by Mount Sinai in the plain there, and God says, have the people observe this festival. And they do. But there were certain people that came to Moses with the question, we are ceremoniously unclean, so therefore we can't observe the Passover because we are unclean. What are we supposed to do? And so Moses goes to God and asks the question, what are these people supposed to do? And so God has an answer for him. He says, in 1 month's time, they will be clean. So in 1 month, on the 14th day of the second month, have these people who are unclean observe the Passover. And so God made a provision that way, so that the people that, according to God's decree, God's law, God's statement, were unclean and could not therefore then celebrate or observe the Passover, God made a provision for them. And how often are we going to find that out of God, that he makes provisions? I mean, he gets angry, and we're going to find that out today too, that things don't always please God, and that's totally understandable, but God makes provisions for people's sinfulness. And these people weren't unclean because of their sinfulness. They were unclean because of being in the presence of someone who had died, and that was, it says, although we are unclean through the touching of a corpse, why can't we observe the Passover? And so, Moses says to him, wait, so that I may hear what the Lord will command concerning you. So, it's kind of like, you go and you ask a question of somebody, and this person says, I'm not sure, but let me go check with, get some facts, and do some research or whatever. But, let me go ask mom, kind of type of deal. Let me go ask dad. But so Moses goes and asks God the question, what are these guys supposed to do? They want to be faithful. They want to do what you have said. And following everything you said, they can't observe the Passover. So God provides for them. He says, that anybody who is clean and not on the journey that doesn't keep it shall be cut off from the people. So if you choose not to observe the Passover, that's, you're not following God's will. So it's everybody is to do this. And within the Jewish community, this is very faithfully followed, and oftentimes, it's not at the church in their synagogue. It is often around the extended family's meal table when they do this. And God says, any alien residing among you who wishes to observe it may do so. You have one statute for alien and resident. So it's, the people who aren't Jewish are also welcome, here to observe the Passover. And so then at verse 15 of chapter 9, on the day the tabernacle was set up, everything was ready to celebrate the Passover, observe it. And from evening until morning, the cloud came and was covering it. And when the cloud was there, it meant that God was there. And then it was then God said, when the cloud dwells over the tabernacle, that means that you shall stay where you are, camp where you are. When the cloud gets up and moves, that means that you as the Israelites should move as well. And so as long as the cloud was over the tabernacle, whether it was a day, a week, a month, a year, 10 years, the people remained camped where they were. And that's, we kind of read that, they spent a good portion of the 40 years of journeying in the wilderness in this one area by this one oasis. And so that means that the cloud with God was kind of hovering over the tabernacle and was there so that they didn't move. But when that cloud moved, then it was, we'll read on, the departure from Sinai happens in chapter 10, that the cloud moves. And so the people, according to what God had told Moses about, this group of the Levites will be responsible for this and this and this, and the 2 carts and the 4 carts and the oxen and all that. And so the first thing that happens, they start packing everything up, and the first 2 wagons, with their oxen and that family, they set out, and then the 4 oxen with the next set out, and then the ones that are, like have the lighter things that they can carry, then they set out. But with each group, there's, like they start out, I think, from the east. The ones that are camped on the east start out going first, and their armies go ahead, and there's 600,000, I think, in the army that, total that are going out. And so, but starting in verse 10, I guess I skipped where God says to make 2 trumpets. And, if they blow both trumpets, it signifies one thing. If they blow 1 trumpet, it's another thing. And it's just like, the trumpets in the army. They blow reveille, they blow taps, they have different things that they blow. And if you heard a da-da-da-da-da, I mean, that means charge, and off you go. And so they had the different things that they would play, signifying what they were supposed to do. If it was to blow the trumpets to assemble the congregation. It's kind of like, in churches that have a bell, we'll ring that bell, several times just as worship begins. And some churches ring that bell as the Lord's Prayer is being prayed. And others ring it again at the end of service, or maybe just at the end of the service. But we have traditions with the ringing of bells, with the blowing of trumpets, with these different things that way. But then it's in verse 11 of chapter 10, it says, in the 2nd year, the 2nd month, on the 20th day. So 2nd month, 20th day, gives those people who were unclean that, the time from the 2nd month, 14th day to the 20th day, time to observe the Passover. And it is then, after God has given them this extended time for them to observe the Passover, that the cloud lifts from over the tabernacle, and God is signifying it's time to move a little ways. And, so then, in verse 12 it starts out, it says they set out by stage, and it, from the wilderness of Sinai, and it says the cloud settled in the wilderness of Paran, which, I think it's going to say was about a 3-day journey, is what most of the Bibles would say. It was a 3-day journey that they set out on. And so when the first group got there, they began setting up the tabernacle in this new location. And when the second group got there, the first group was ready, and, everything was taken down in order and put together in order. And this was what God had them do it. And so as we read through, chapter 10, it's pretty much the moving of the tabernacle, and and it says, like verse 35, it says, whenever the ark set out, Moses would say, "Arise, O Lord, let your enemies be scattered and your foes flee before you." A kind of a prayer, a request to God to watch over and guide them. It's I remember going on many youth trips and different church trips, and we would always have a prayer before we would go. But it wasn't very often that we remembered to have a prayer when we got to where we were going. But when they would get to their new place, Moses would when it would say, "Return, O Lord, to the 10,000 of Israel. Come back and watch over us, be with us. You've been going ahead of us, watching out, protecting. Now be with us." chapter 11, I'm not going to get into too much of that today. We're getting short on time again, always, but the people start complaining to Moses. I mean, they've been, that was a year and 2 months, that they were in the wilderness, in the plain of Sinai, and they're starting to move, and they're still eating manna in the wilderness, this food that God provides, and they're saying, we're getting sick of just eating this stuff. We want some meat. We want everything we had in Egypt, and so God says to Moses, yeah, they'll eat meat, all right. He says, I'm going to cause so much meat to come that they're going to be sick of it, And so it says that the quail come from and surround the camp, and it's just, they're piled high. It just, the provision of God, again, exceeds greatly, their need. And it's, just a reminder that, God provides generously in that, and I've always kind of wondered, well, they've got their sheep, they got their cattle, they got their livestock. Didn't they used to eat some of that, in Egypt? Or the Egyptians, fed them out of theirs, but anyway, that's beside the point. But the point is that God provides an abundance. And God gets a little bit testy with the people. And, toward the end of verse 32 of chapter 11, people worked all that night and day, the next day, gathering quails, and the least anyone gathered was 10 homers. I don't know what a homer is, but it was a lot. And when the meat was still between their teeth and before it was consumed, it says the anger of the Lord was kindled against the people, and he attacked them with a plague. If somebody is a chronic complainer, we get tired of listening to them. And this is what God did. God was providing, but yet the people weren't happy. And happens yet today, really. So, it's count your blessings and be thankful to God because he's with you abundantly.